This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Philadelphia to Erie and from Scranton to Pittsburgh. It's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewald, Senior Fellow for the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host Maura Donnelly. Welcome, Maura.
Hello, Charlie.
Hi, Maura. Well, today we were very lucky to have special guests, and have a very special program for our viewers.
We do, absolutely.
Indeed. Today we are fortunate enough to have the longest-serving President Pro Tem in the history of the Pennsylvania State Senate and one of the most accomplished and significant legislators in the history of the Pennsylvania Senate and the state of Pennsylvania, and that is Senator Robert Jubelirer. Senator Jubelirer, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm delighted to be here and join you and be a part of your program. Thank you so much.
Well, we're very glad and very grateful to have you with us today. We also have with us Dave Atkinson. Dave was the executive assistant for Senator Jubelirer, as well as being for a period of time, the director of communications for the state Senate, and certainly he has spent most of his adult life in Pennsylvania state government. And Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, we're happy to have you. We're having you because you just you have a book that you've done on your time in the Senate and your career in Pennsylvania government. What have you named the book, and how have you who have you released it through, Senator?
The name of the book is "The Senate Will Come to Order," and the subtitle is "But Politics Can Be Messy." And so it's taken more than 5 years to do this book. David was instrumental in helping us accomplish it, and Vince Carocci is the actual author of the book along with David. So I'm pretty excited about it. I frankly have to tell you, egotistical as it may sound, I love this book.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, and I think
okay.
it's fast reading and interesting reading, and it's not a mean book by any means, but there are a lot of stories that I was able to tell.
Well, Dave, why did you and Senator Jubelirer decide to write the book?
Well, you've mentioned his experience and his leadership capacity. A lot of stories to tell, and positive stories. In the current climate, you hear a lot about people taking others apart, things not getting done, deadlock, people are unhappy. Over the course of his career, of course there were controversies and there were times when things didn't work, but there were times where people came together, they negotiated big bills, they got projects done, they got things to move Pennsylvania forward. They came up with solutions that address key problems that they were hearing about from their constituents. And so these are all good stories, and people like to take a look back sometimes and find out if there are things that perhaps can guide the events of today or tomorrow.
So let's just cut right to the chase. What's your favorite story? Tell us your favorite
Oh, boy.
It might be hard to pick one, but...
I don't know.
Well, you almost have to pick one, a legislative one, a district one, a project one, because there's so many categories. Yes.
Yeah, the legislative one, there was a couple of them, but the Modern Sunshine Law, which I've always believed in transparency, and I'm on the Penn State Board of Trustees now, and that's a difficult nut to crack when it comes to transparency, and the student program, we call it?
Tuition account program, TAP.
Yeah, TAP, the tuition account plan, and to help parents and grandparents like me. I've bought it for my grandchildren, and David's bought it for his grandchildren.
I tell everybody about it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful
Really
program,
is.
and it's just gotten better and better over the years to help educate children, grandchildren, whatever. So I would say those are two that stand out. There's been a lot. I've been fortunate to have a number of accomplishments, legislative accomplishments. And projects, boy, we did a lot of projects and always worked together. But I've always said that the signature project to me was the Bedford Springs Hotel, the redevelopment of the Bedford Springs Hotel, which was falling down. And it was a grand old hotel that James Buchanan, it was his summer home. There's so much history involved in it. And we had, frankly, one, I'll say, incompetent developer after another that wanted to do it. And we were not satisfied with that. And at least we didn't own it, but there would be no state money in those cases. And we finally got wonderful developers who were for real, and they did it the right way. And $140 million later, we have...
It's back to its
yeah,
old
we
state.
have one of the fine resorts anywhere in Pennsylvania, frankly, in the country. In my judgment, I think it saved a lot of businesses in Bedford County, a county that I happen to love, and was part of my district. And it was a big hit, and I can remember talking to retailers who were going to close because Bedford was dead, and I talked them into staying. Those same retailers.
Just hang in there with me.
Yeah,
working
I
on
did.
it.
That's exactly what I
Yeah.
did. I'd hang in there with me, believe in me, and I put my own credibility on the line as we got good developers, and those same retailers have expanded who were going to close. So.
At the same time, there's a lot of local material and a lot of local craftsmanship went into that restoration too.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Senator, we're going to get to a lot of your accomplishments, but I want to return to your book for a second.
Yeah.
You took a sort of an unconventional approach to this book in having two fellow writers. I guess you are trying to you are recounting decades of legislative experience,
Right.
and you're doing that with David, but you were also working with Vince Caroci.
Right.
Now, his choice is interesting for some of us because he was a reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and he was actually worked for the other side. He worked for the Democrats as a press secretary for Governor Casey. So how did you come to pick Vince? And this is a very interesting combination of talent,
Well,
Senator.
you used the word that I would answer with talent. And Vince has a lot of talent. He's written a number of books. He knew his way around. David is extraordinary. We had to have them be able to work together. And you couldn't have two people work together better than David and Vince. And I've known Vince a long time. Penn Stater, what the heck? It can't be all bad. And he gave a perspective sometimes, but the book is mine, and and he clearly was instrumental in being a major part of making it happen, as was David.
Vince adds a lot of value to this, and when people read the book and they see his walks through how the legislature changed decades ago, how the media changed, how the lobby corps changed. He adds historical perspective and partisan balance to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so it really contributes to the credibility. This is a memoir, but it's also meant to be an exercise in reflecting on the past and lessons learned. And Vince contributed that mightily.
Yeah.
So you're not going to know this or remember this, but I actually was hired in the Senate of Pennsylvania by Senator Zemprelli as counsel in the Senate many years ago.
Yeah.
So I was around when you were,
Yeah.
but I was, just a staff person at that time.
Don't
so,
say just.
Well, I think I was probably one of the first female attorneys hired in the Senate. So that was something. Senator Zemprelli was quite a character.
Oh, absolutely.
And I just loved him, and he was just such a great guy. And I think he probably retired too early, but there are a lot of characters in the Senate, in the House, and I'm sure your book tells a few stories. Who's one of your favorite people that you had to work with on a regular basis? And
Well, I had to deal with Vince all the time, and of course that's Vince Fumo.
yes,
And
not Vince Perci, but
and
Vince Fumo.
no, that was Vince Fumo, and he was a character,
He was.
to say the least.
I was terrified
And
of him.
What's that?
I was terrified of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I wasn't, and that just drove him crazy.
Yeah.
But Vince could be a bully at times, not only his own caucus, but he tried to do it with me and other leaders in our caucus as well. So I respected Vince, and I know he respected me because he couldn't run over me, and I wasn't afraid of him at all. And interesting, as we go prior to that time, I was elected in the Watergate year of 1974, and it was pretty rough. I was the only freshman Republican elected to the Pennsylvania Senate at that time. Joe Loper lost that year, and he was elected the following 4 years later. But so I had to really, I was fortunate to do it. I had to go through a primary, and where I won one county, my own, and lost 4, and then a general election where I lost my county and won 3 of the other counties. But 5 years later, fast forward, I'm the majority leader. Well, I guess I was majority leader of the Senate. Henry Hager became president pro tempore, and it was the Reagan landslide. We picked up 4 seats in that election, and
You're no longer a junior
no,
senator.
Senator Hager came to me. I was hoping to get into leadership, and did I ever? But he wanted me to be the majority leader. He felt that I would compliment him. We were good friends, and that was quite a chat. But having said that, you can only imagine a green, very green, majority leader sitting down with one Jim Mandarino negotiating budgets and other issues that were important to him and some to us and so forth. And I had to negotiate them. I don't think I ever said to him, "Oh, that'll be fine, Jim." I didn't even know. I just said, "I'll get back to you."
Senator, your career went at light speed to
Yeah.
go
I didn't
from
realize
a newly minted member of the Senate and become majority leader
yeah.
in that shorter period of time.
And then 4 years after that, I was president pro tem.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I guess it's the old story: be at the right place at the right time, and I had good relationships in caucus with members. There was an old guard, and there was a new wave of Republican senators, and I had some trouble. I had to deal with people like Clarence Bell, Ed Hall, Dick Tillman, and so forth, all been there for a number of years, and whose respect I had to earn. And believe me, that was not easy. But I think I did, and I worked well with them. Sometimes Senator Hall could be a bit of a problem, but we finally got things done. We didn't have 34-24 or 34-16. We didn't have that.
Yeah.
We had 26-24. So I needed them all. And then, of course, we kept it by people like Melissa Hart getting elected, Frank Pecora in Democrat districts, Rick Santorum's successful advance to Congress first, and then the United States Senate was helpful in those days. As Vince Fumo was about to announce that the Democrats had taken the majority, he was on television in Philadelphia, taken the majority from the Pennsylvania Senate, and somebody whispers in his ear that somebody by the name of Melissa Hart was declared a winner in Allegheny County, and he had to.
Oh.
She saved our majority at that time.
You know, Maura, when he retired, we toted it up, and he had served with 147 men and women in the Senate, and a number of them are mentioned in here, including Zemp gets mentioned. But there are people who are profiled extensively. Dick Snyder of Lancaster County being an example, Mike Fisher being another example. And there's mention made of individuals who, for one reason or another, really put their stamp on the Senate. And it's not just a list of Republicans, because that list includes Jim Kelly, Jim Ross. So these names are all coming back to you, I'm sure. So it is a balanced account. It's not just our side was always right, the other side was always wrong. It's a balanced account.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we will be right back with the second half of this discussion with Senator Jubelirer right after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. The Pennsylvania Chamber serves as the frontline advocate for business on Pennsylvania's Capitol Hill by influencing the legislative, regulatory, and judicial branches of state government. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to Behind the Headlines. Maura and I are fortunate enough on this show to have Senator Robert Jubelirer, the former President Pro Tem of the Pennsylvania State Senate, with us, and former Lieutenant Governor, by the way, and Dave Atkinson, his trusted aide, with us today to talk about his book and about his life and his accomplishments in Pennsylvania. Senator, I wanted to start out with this second half, but just asking briefly about where did your interest in politics come from?
I came from a political family in a sense. My father was involved in politics, very close friend of George Bloom's, a Republican legend. Nobody will remember on the outside of, you had to be about at least 80, 90 years old or so.
That's why we need to read your book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But, my dad was involved in politics and Republican politics. He was finance chairman for the Blair County Republican Party, and he eventually was appointed by Governor Schaefer, I guess. Governor Schaefer, as judge of the Court of Common Pleas of Blair County. And I got bitten by the bug. I got out of law school in 1962.
You went to what law school?
To Dickinson Law School
and
in
where did you
Carlisle,
go to
Pennsylvania.
So you went to Dickinson, and where did you go to college?
A place called Happy Valley.
Penn State.
And it's very happy right now.
Yes.
Penn State, yeah. Yeah, I bleed blue and white. And anyhow, after I took the bar exam, I had to wait several months until it was assured that I had passed it. So I had some time. I could have worked in the office, I guess, but I didn't really want to, but I did. And then my dad got a call from George Bloom, who was the Republican state chairman at that time. They needed someone to run a sound wagon in western Pennsylvania. Would Bob be interested in doing that? And I guess it was he turned it over to my brother, who was in the law firm, and my brother said, would you like to do this? And my brother was active in politics, Republican politics as well. And I said, yeah, I think it would be fun. And so I got the opportunity to drive it was like a station wagon with a sound system on top. And I would
That
go.
really was what it was.
It was. It really was.
Sound wagon.
I would
Okay.
go from town to town. I had the western part I had from State College to Erie. That was my territory. And so when Governor Scranton was speaking in Clearfield or Erie or wherever, I would go in advance. And with that sound system on top, I would say, Governor or Congressman Scranton is going to be in town today. He's running for governor of Pennsylvania. He'll be at the YMCA at 6 o'clock. Please attend. There's no charge. Just kind of rev up a crowd. And boy, was I bitten, because I used to get into those meetings with Bill Scranton and Ray Schaefer and Walter Allison-Droney and so forth. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is fun. Practicing law is going to be boring. And anyhow, I met a man by the name that probably, I'm not sure you guys remember, but John Tabor was the head of Western Pennsylvanians for Scranton. And I got to know him pretty well. We became very, very close friends. He eventually became Secretary of Internal Affairs. He beat Genevieve Bott. That's his claim to fame in history. And then they eliminated the office constitutionally. But anyhow, John went into the administration, the Scranton administration, and I was ready to go. And my father said, you really should learn your craft first. And he took me to meet with George Bloom. And what George Bloom said, learn how to make a living. Don't ever depend on politics for your livelihood. Good advice.
Very good advice.
And I did, and I eventually ran for the state chairmanship of the Young Republicans of Pennsylvania. By the way, that is as rough a group as you can ever imagine, but I was successful in that election, and right after that I ran for the Senate with the support of no one. By the way, I mean that seriously.
Really?
Yeah, my parents didn't want me to run. My friends didn't want me to run. The Republican establishment didn't want me to run. Senator Hugh Scott had an aide that was running at the time, and I couldn't win. Every place I've ever been, by the way.
So this really is your revenge book.
No.
Yeah.
No. I have had in my life, and if we would fast forward even to the Penn State Board of Trustees, you can't win. You're going to lose. I said, you bet. If I don't run, I lose.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And I ignored them every time, and I just worked harder. That's all. But
That's really the theme throughout the book, is that it is perseverance and persistence.
Yeah.
And it's in his political career, it's in his legislative life, because, again, throughout his Senate career, people always said, this bill will never pass. This project will never be built. There's no way that this problem is going to get solved. And he just refused to recognize no.
Well, Dave, we're in the 1970s, and he's running for the first time. Pennsylvania politics is a little different in the 1970s than it is today.
Oh, certainly
Could you
was.
tell us just briefly, and then ask Senator Jubelirer his impression of what politics was like then? But how do you remember it?
It was a lot different in terms of you didn't have the money, you didn't have the modern media. So your pitch was nowhere near as wholesale as it is today. It was much more a retail pitch. And that's not to diminish the importance of retail these days, but it was much more retail. He had a budget for one of his early reelects. The budget was $20,000. You can't even get a good ad these days for $20,000.
Right.
And so that gives you a sense of a different thing. The parties were much stronger. But that didn't necessarily mean that the parties were united or that the parties were on your side.
Yeah.
So you have that kind of difference as well.
Yeah, well, Dave is right, and it was very tough for me to raise money, but I had a good chairman, and we put together a good committee, and we raised some money, but I borrowed money from my life insurance and things like that. I was committed. I mean, I was absolutely committed. I can't get into anything unless I give it 100%. And I wanted to win, and I knocked on a lot of doors.
You certainly did. Senator, we were down to 2 minutes time here.
Okay.
This show just goes way too fast. While you were in the Senate, you thought your primary accomplishment you'd like to think was TAP and was the transparency in government?
Yeah, the Sunshine Law. Those were two really 5 years for each of them, and with a Democrat governor who didn't want either one of them. And we finally, Jeanette Reedman felt that Senator Reedman was the only one that should be doing education bills, so she wasn't happy that I was doing the tuition account program. But she finally came along and negotiated hard the Sunshine Law. And frankly, it was Senator Doyle Corman and I who finally, Doyle was a former county commissioner, one of my very good friends, and we ended up working together and negotiated and compromised to get the Sunshine Law at that time.
Senator, in the last minute of the show, we have to ask you to come back, please, because I know there are a lot more stories.
I want to get down to some dirt. We got to get there's got to be some in there.
There was a lot more stories that I know you have to share. But in the last few seconds, now you're on the Penn State board. You're not enjoying retirement at all because you refused to, and now you're helping out everyone at Penn State. What in the last 30 seconds can we expect to be seeing at Penn State in a few?
It's been a tremendous challenge to be on that board, and let me tell you, it's the most political organization I've ever been in, so you can take that for that.
That's quite a bit. Well, we hope that you'll come back again next week, and we want to thank Senator Jubelirer and Dave for being with Mara and me today, and we hope you'll be with us again next week for another edition of Behind the Headlines.